grab a seat. I'm going to check. Still working as an attorney, or are you retired?
No, still working, probably for a long time. Okay. Yeah. I do different types of cases now. I work in the narcotics and money laundering unit.
Okay.
So I work, sort of large-scale drug operations, cartels, that kind of thing. In 2012, a company called Inys Therapeutics produced at the time a drug called Subsys, what's called a rapid onset opioid, fentanyl.
Pain is a gold mine for drug makers. After Purdue Pharma's success with opioid OxyContin, others rushed to get in on the action. Inys began making a sublingual liquid form of fentanyl, a highly addictive drug some 50 times more potent than heroin. A miracle spray for cancer patients, for others a gateway to hell.
Please help me welcome John Kapoor.
The owner of the company, John Kapoor, is a very successful businessman. He owns several different businesses. He's extremely unhappy at the time about the launch of the drug. It's a very, very competitive market, and the drug is not succeeding. It's struggling to gain a market. Wanted very much for the company to go public. So they hire this very aggressive person named Alec Burlikoff.
For many of you out there, you have not had the opportunity to experience the excitement, or more importantly, the achievement.
Inys had its IPO in 2013.
A year later, when they went public, total value of the stock was more than $1 billion.
When Inys entered Wall Street, it was extremely exciting. Obviously, there was a bunch of money on the table, options, and so forth.
But you know what? If it is a speculative stock,
it became a very popular stock to buy.
what's it?
Sales numbers came out on a daily basis in the morning. It incentivized me every day.
There's a gold mine. They saw Purdue was making $2 billion a year selling opioids, right? A lot of other companies jumped on the bandwagon.
I have a plan. We can sell in the first 90 days $1 million of Fentora.
If you fail in the parking lot, you shoot up.
Addicts definitely made us a lot of extra money. That is true.
In some parts of the US, it was becoming harder to tell doctors
Good arithmetic.
from dealers.
It was just a free-for-all. It was a wild, wild west show. So I started off as the medical assistant.
The doctors carried guns, some of them, under their lab coats. We deployed a series of investigative techniques against them.
155 hydroxycodone that made you feel okay.
Soon the Mexican cartels were wanting to cash in too. Have you tried the drug?
No, I wouldn't be here if I had.
That understand that they're working in the gray. Black and white really didn't exist at Inys. It doesn't exist at a lot of companies, quite frankly.
We have never been able to say no in America to companies and people who want to make money.
In this case, several whistleblowers filed qui tam actions against Inys Therapeutics here in Boston.
They put blood on my hands involuntarily, you know what I mean? That was a tough thing to get over. I felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. I started working with Nat Yeager. Is a highly intelligent man. I did feel like this was a mission of his, that he was definitely one of the guys who knew exactly what was going on.
Basically what the whistleblowers are saying is that they started bribing doctors. And the most common method was a speaker program. And they told them that they wanted them to talk to other doctors about the benefits of the drug.
And 9 times out of 10, they never did a presentation. They just showed up for the scheduled dinner, lunch, or whatever, breakfast.
Alec Burlikoff hired a fair number of women who had worked as exotic dancers, and who would go and flirt with doctors and convince the doctors to write the scripts based on that relationship.
I would say really the question is why not? I mean, why are they why do they have less ability or less potential than anybody else because they were an exotic dancer? I mean,
I see a bunch of these young girls with some of the executives in a jacuzzi. And I just thought, these girls don't know what they're getting themselves into. This is not a good thing.
Former sales rep Mia Guzman was the first to blow the whistle on Inys when she appeared on this vodcast.
It's a publicly traded company, for crying out loud, doing this. I remember at one point he even told me to dump my boyfriend.
So it's called bribing, no?
yeah, I would call it bribery. And the fact of the matter is we didn't care. Our goal was to get money in the physician's pocket so that we could directly influence them to use more of the medication.
In the United States, we have a criminal statute that was passed originally to deal with the mafia, to deal with organized crime. And it's called RICO, or the Racketeering Corrupt Organizations Act. We use that in this case to go after the company and the executives of the company.
To get the goods on Inys, Nathaniel Yeager relied on evidence gathered from whistleblower recordings.
Two of the sales reps put on a wire, right? And they go into these sales reps' meetings. I think it was in Arizona.
That was really scary. I recorded some information at a meeting in Arizona.
And you hear the bosses talking about different ways to sell the drugs. One guy's, he's a prominent salesman in Tampa, Florida. He's telling people that doctors should prescribe opioids for people who suffer from depression. I mean, the idea that you would, prescribe, an opioid, an addictive opioid to someone that suffers from depression is,
Inys Therapeutics, that is our name. We're raising the bar and we're changing the game. To be great, it takes a decision to be better than the competition.
I remember where I was when there was an assistant who came in and said, "You got to see this video they sent. Sales reps dressed up like rappers
Going deeper than Dan in a submarine.
They're dancing around to a tune by A$AP Rocky,
More docs than Janelle's got selfies. Always
singing a song about titration.
I love titrations, yeah, that's not a problem. And I got new patients and I got a lot of them. I love titrations.
In this context, titration refers to gradually upping the dose of a drug, something internal emails have shown Berlikov urged his sales reps to do. There was a scale. The higher the dose of fentanyl, the bigger the bonus they'd get.
You know, and it's a very serious decision to increase the dosage of fentanyl, and they're dancing around telling people titration's okay, titration's okay.
He was one of the Florida reps, and he was a snake. He was what we call the titration king.
Okay, I got it.
Absence of morals. He didn't care that he was putting this powerful drug in these people. He did not care at all. Didn't care at all.
It looks a bit like the definition of a cult.
Yeah, I haven't heard that before, but I wouldn't disagree with you. I can tell you that it's the small percentage that adapted that cult-like atmosphere that moved the company and allowed the company to become the #1 IPO in the country in 2013.
The sunlight comes around. You feel a weight upon your shoulders.
In Florida, the opioid epidemic would take on another dimension entirely. The Sunshine State's lax regulations meant it was party time for pill mills.
Not today.
These streets have all pharmacies and doctors' offices back then in those wild, wild west days before the rules came into play.
If you let it go, oh yeah, yeah.
Street 20th Avenue, this is the next doctor's office. We have a commercial hospital, Holy Cross Hospital right here. And we had this other doctor's office. This building right here, psychiatrists, doing the same over here.
They would advertise everywhere. You would see advertising for, we will prescribe opioids on benches, bus benches, for instance. You would have clinics where someone would hire doctors, but really they weren't hiring doctors. They were hiring doctors' prescription pads. And that's why they called it a pill mill, you know? Palm Beach County became the epicenters for the pill mill epidemic.
There were more pain clinics than there were McDonald's restaurants. I want to say the number off the top of my head was over 130 of them in the county.
And his whole street would be parked with cars. This guy was Vinny something, an Italian guy. He had a backyard where he'd sit the patients out with a barbecue, sodas. The junkies were back there, snorting and shooting their pills back there. Vinny, he was just criminal like them. Like, bro, I mean, we're all criminals, obviously.
Valdez once dreamed of changing his life.
Bro, I'm a drug dealer from the street, you know? So I started off as the medical assistant. I got in doing vitals and stuff like that on patients, their blood pressures. I got hired by these gentlemen that were the owners, and he looked at me and he saw I had the look of like a drug dealer type person, and I felt that he needed me as his character, you know, because he had a waiting room full of, you know, drug addicts and drug dealers. There was no database at the time. You can get multiple medications from multiple doctors in a week. It's pretty crazy.
Where's the spark boss?
Down there.
Can you do me a favor? Can you just pull it over this way for me?
Yeah. Anywhere?
We started to look at the problem itself. Who was doing it? How were they supplied? What were their methods? Once we started to take a look, we determined that the most prolific distributors were the George brothers. by an order of magnitude more than every other dealer or doctor in the entire state, in the entire country, quite frankly. So they were the biggest, they were the most prolific, and the most successful, temporarily.
Chris George and his twin brother Jeff had no medical credentials and were buying oxy and fentanyl from drug wholesalers. That in itself was perfectly legal. It would take police about 3 years to prove that the George brothers were running a criminal operation.
Tara?
You know, it's gonna have a bunch of windows in the front, this big entryway. These are huge windows here.
My name is Chris George. I ran the largest pain clinic in the world in Florida in the late 2000s, which caused the opiate epidemic in the US. You know, so we were still kids and, making a ton of money. Yeah, it was just a good time, It was a really good time, My favorite vehicle was, this Freightliner pickup truck. It was like a semi-truck converted to like a pickup. It was like the biggest thing ever on the street. And, it was like $250,000. Money wasn't really an issue at that time. I wish I would have bought more stuff, but, I bought four-wheelers, swamp buggies, jet skis, it's a lot of boats. I wish it was like that again. Maybe it will one day. We opened up and made it so easy to get the pain meds, because back then we didn't have any regulations, so they could prescribe pain meds to almost anybody that said they were in pain.
And because Florida lacked a computerized tracking system, people could purchase and get prescriptions for drugs at multiple locations. Many of the patients filling waiting rooms at clinics and offices were either addicts or traffickers.
All cell phones off.
I went inside the waiting room and I looked around the room and I saw a bunch of just huge, big black Jamaican guys, or just black dudes with gold teeth, big old heavy chains. Some of them had their guns on their side. It was pretty crazy. So I walked in there like, what am I getting into,
They're all kind of like little, slummy, bummy looking a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, poor.
Poor, and they just, they don't care about the clothes they wear. They don't get plastic surgery. None of the girls that came in there had fake breasts. And down in Florida, everybody does that.
People were coming in, just addicts, you could see them.
They're the perfect, right?
They're gonna come every month, right? Because they need the pills. The addicts gave us a lot of business, so that is true.
You step your bills in a parking lot, you're shooting up.
They had little old ladies that were nurses and different normal people that they were getting yelled at by these drug dealers and drug abusers and trying to cut the line and get in front, and no one wants to wait and argue with some of us and fight, and they have drug deals going on outside and people were just trying to get in and out and just get their pills.
So you ever get rid of the oxys?
The Roxys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sell for 13 apiece.
In the lobby, outside the lobby, in the cars, in the parking lot, people waiting to meet up drug deals. It's like my hometown.
It only took probably a month or two for the police to really start looking into us. Just because the neighbors were complaining about these people coming here.
We deployed a series of investigative techniques against them. We started to conduct surveillance. We eventually graduated to using undercover officers and agents to go inside the clinics.
The cops, it didn't bother me too much when they were around, because it's like, what are you gonna do to me? They told me they can't do nothing to me. Because I'm the owner of a clinic. I don't see the patients. I don't write them the prescription. I don't have a license to do this. It's a doctor's office. So the doctors I would hire, they weren't my partner. They were just employees. I'd pay them a set fee per patient, like $75 per patient.
Now, you're just on oxycodone. How much oxycodone are you taking? 150, 5 a day, right? Gross nightly. That made you feel okay?
So we ended up putting the MRI behind a strip club. It was a perfect location because we were open 24 hours a day, and the strip club's open at night. And they'd go to the strip club in between when they're waiting, and they liked that, so it worked out pretty good.
If you were to conduct an MRI of the spine of anybody over the age of 25 or 30, you would find some abnormality. As a doctor can point to it and say, I'm a doctor, that's what's causing this person's pain.
I guess the ticket to get pills, yeah. The doctor visit was $200, and then on average, the pills are about $500. So it's almost about $1,000 the first visit.
Cash?
Yeah, it was only cash.
Everything was just cash. Cash visit, cash for the P-test, cash for the pills. Everything was just cash.
30, 32, 34, 36.
Thousands of dollars just paying cash for the
Good arithmetic.
At the end, we're making about $2 million a month profit.
Did it ever happen?
No, surprisingly, no one ever tried to rob us. We were ready, though.
The doctors carried guns, some of them, under their lab coats.
If someone tried to do anything to rob us, they would have had a tough time. They probably wouldn't have left there alive.
A lot of people died of overdose. Some of them died of overdose because people probably take pills that you bought them. How does it make you feel?
Well, so I don't take responsibility for them.
But you sell the pills.
But so, yeah, it's a legal pill to sell. I sell a prescription drug. It's a prescription, What they do with it, kind of out of my hands. And if they took it as prescribed, they're not gonna die. But I'm not gonna lose sleep every night someone dies because it's their responsibility. We give them, you have freedoms. Freedom has a cost.
We wanted to do this correctly. We could have run out and arrested everybody, and they'd be back on the street tomorrow doing the same thing. We wanted to make sure that once we arrested everybody, everybody went to jail, and this entire organization stops. And spent a week, real time, watching all of that surveillance video.
150 of the blues, and then how many did you get?
Yeah, 180.
Really?
45.
That was your first time here? Huh?
Yeah, the old man.
Yeah, the old guy. You got the fat guy?
Yeah, but you got the younger, you got 180 blues, 120, 50 pieces. Say 150.
Robert here? Bird? Number 600, is that the next time? Okay. Yep. How you been, all right?
The amount of time each patient spent inside the examination room, 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
And with a timer. He didn't care. Wrote these pills, okay, please take them out of here, grab me the next one.
We went and spoke to nationally recognized experts. How long would it take to do all these tests that these doctors checked off? They said maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And they looked at the records, they said, this isn't medicine, this is drug dealing. They're making $1.2 million in a year. So they couldn't resist it. They could not resist it.
They're just hiding behind their lab coats and their 12-year degrees that they have, that they've taken oaths to help people, families, and keep you alive. They're actually getting people hooked, And I have to hide and dodge and duck and having to look over my shoulder so I don't get arrested and go to jail, you know what I mean? I'm watching these people with money in high places do what I'm doing. They're doing it with a smile. I caught a lot of anger and it bothered the out of me, I'm not gonna lie.
It was these very tactics of the opioid industry that had fatal consequences for Sarah Fuller. Her overdose could have easily gone unnoticed, but an inquiry into her death uncovered a scam of gigantic proportions.
What kind of memories you have when you come here?
Sad. You know, looking at it, it's just really sad. When you go through something like that, that makes you really question your own mortality. And it's really messed me up a lot. We didn't just lose one life there. We lost all of it.
Sarah was taking OxyContin but wanted to stop.
They prescribed her OxyContin. She actually basically got addicted to it. She ended up in the hospital, and they basically took her off of it straight. Ended up being all right.
She was a lot more energetic. She wasn't sleeping as much. She wasn't as tired. She wasn't as lethargic. She had recently got back with a guy that she dated for years prior. They were engaged. Her life was definitely getting better.
Sarah was glad to be off OxyContin, but she was still suffering from back pain. Her father made an appointment with a family doctor who wanted to introduce him to someone.
Then they said they had this new medication that would help her out. They closed the door and they explained us to about the medicine. It really didn't say it was fentanyl.
We were never told that the fentanyl was an opiate. We were never told that, you know, from day one you could be addicted, or that it could be lethal.
You put it underneath your tongue, and I guess it absorbs into the body that way.
But the person who demonstrated how the fentanyl spray worked wasn't the GP. It was someone they'd never seen before, but who was in the doctor's office.
How does she was introduced to you?
As a representative from the medical company.
You were told the truth that she was a sales rep.
Yeah, sales rep. Yeah.
And when she made the appointment, she told you that I'm going to introduce you to a sales rep.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, strange. And did it seem strange to you to meet a sales rep?
No, because I was raised that way, where you trusted your doctors with your life.
I can't tell you that I wasn't made aware of the fact that it was oftentimes common practice for a physician to call in the substance rep into the exam room.
And that's totally illegal.
Totally illegal. Absolutely, positively illegal. Can't do it.
Good to see you. Good to see you too. Always good to see everything. Okay. You too. Yeah.
Never ever in the U.S. have executives from a pharmaceutical company ever been prosecuted. We're going against industry. We're going against Goliath.
Richard Hollowell is a personal injury attorney. His research revealed that Sarah should never have been prescribed fentanyl.
Well, at that time, there wasn't much information out there. What this company is. What are their products? One product, Subsys, that was approved for end-of-life breakthrough cancer pain. It was really like putting a puzzle together.
The fentanyl prescribed to Sarah was only approved to treat sudden, intense cancer pain.
Sarah was not a cancer patient.
Nah. They just told me it was for pain and that it would help her with her chronic pain.
The cost of the treatment, over $24,000 per month. Unlike in most of Europe, there's no universal healthcare in the US, meaning the bill is footed by private insurers. And they often don't make it easy to get reimbursed.
So I could have sold all the medication I wanted. I could have gotten millions of prescriptions. If insurance doesn't pay for it, it means nothing.
And you had to convince the insurance companies to pay for the drug.
To do that, Inys set up its own reimbursement center, essentially a call center.
The call center was a sham.
It was filled with call operators who pretended to be from the doctor's offices all over the country.
Thank you for calling Invasion RX Plus. This is Kismet. How can I help you today?
Hi, my name is Gina, and I'm with the doctor's office.
And lied to the insurance companies.
So it was a middleman.
One of the operators at the center pretending to be a doctor's assistant was Patty Nixon.
We had to lie to the insurance company. We would have little scripts, things that we would say to each particular insurance company because they were all a little different. It was a word game. I would say, I'm Patty calling with Dr. Auerbach's office, even though I'm in an office building in Phoenix, Arizona, and Dr. Auerbach's office is in Michigan. They record every single phone call, so there's a record somewhere.
I was hell-bent on getting an audio or whatever evidence of this process.
Hollowell aimed to prove that Inys had lied about Sarah and her pain.
And I pinpointed the date that I believe that the call was made. I was trying to find anyone to lead me to information.
He got his hands on a list of the Inys Reimbursement Center operators and called them one by one. Eventually, he reached Patricia Nixon.
So I would spend hours on the phone with him trying to figure out how we can get this phone call from the insurance company. But finally, they did give it to him, and that changed everything for the case.
Good morning, Ms. Flores. I'm going to play this portion of the call.
There it was, on audio recording, an Inys employee committing insurance fraud. It's right there in black and white.
Clinical department, this is Jeff. How can I help you?
Hi, Jeff. You guys must be very busy people.
We are, and I apologize for long waits, but how can I help you now?
I mean, that phone call leading to her death.
Oh, great. Okay, what's the patient's last name and date of birth?
Her last name is Fuller, F-U-L-L-E-R. First name is Sarah.
And which medication are you calling about?
It's sepsis.
Is it also for the breakthrough cancer pain or not?
This is breakthrough pain, yeah.
Good, okay.
Let me stop there. Was that the spiel that you were just reading from?
Yes.
Your response to that question, were you trained to give that response?
Yes.
Is this for breakthrough cancer pain? And we would respond with, yes, it's for the breakthrough pain.
Breakthrough pain, yeah.
So we gave them the impression that it was breakthrough cancer pain without quite saying it.
That was it. I mean, that was the evidence of a massive fraud.
Having upped the dose, Inys shipped the fentanyl to the Fuller home via FedEx.
Technically, fentanyl is only supposed to be increased by, I think, 100 to titrate up, and they had already started her out at 200.
Yeah, usually
and then
start
within
there.
like a month or two, she was bumped up to 600 without even being told.
So they titrated her without her knowing it, without her asking for it? Did she ask for something?
Mm-mm.
What other medications in the same therapeutic class have been tried?
Okay, they've tried morphine sulfate, oxycodone, Oxycontin. Her patient is opioid tolerant.
She had actually mentioned to my mom 2 weeks to her passing, she's like, I feel like I'm dying. When we found out from the coroner's office, she was dead before she hit the ground.
y'all think you're bad? Well, I'm the baddest. I was created in the lab in the land of the cactus. Created, I'm the man, understand you can't match this. Even if you ran and you planned and you practice, I'll still overlap you on this track move. As a matter of fact, while I shatter this rap, let's cheddar and grasp my delivery. It's giving me 38% of this industry plus my availability. I'm built to last, y'all can't get rid of me.
How did you block out the reality of the epidemics, the deaths?
I mean, I blocked it out simply by not reading the news, not scouring the web.
Sir, wake up, can you hear me?
Anything like that that came my way, I just literally put my blinders on and just kept going. Because I knew that would have a negative impact on my ability to do my job, not only to sell, but it would impact my ability to lead. And I think that's where it all went wrong for me, is that I put the company and myself before society.
I love titration, yeah, that's not a problem.
At the base of the story of the opioids and fentanyl and all the rest is this economy that has transformed regular products into drug-like products. Sugar, coffee, gambling, video games, smartphones, social media. What connects all of this is capitalism's focus on most potent stuff, knowing that it will create more customers. It's good for the profit. It's good for shareholders. Sugar hits the same receptors in our brain as does heroin. Because corporations understand human brain chemistry, probably even better than drug dealers. It's a scary thing, what we've allowed to have happen to our economy, I think.
On the other side of the border, Mexican narcos took note of the American pharma industry's remarkable success.
They begin to say, wow, this is something that's going on. Then you know, they read the news too, and they can see what's going on. Plus they have dealers on the street. A guy in Sinaloa has a cousin in Pennsylvania, and he's got friends over here in Philadelphia, so let's go, you know, they have all that kind of thing. It's very diffuse. The light goes on and they say, so wait, we don't have to grow poppies anymore? Yeah. It's like heroína sintética, synthetic heroin. Exactly, chemicals only.
Very good.
There are two types of fentanyl, the Bayer brand and the Chinese kind. The Bayer brand with the red label, which comes from Germany, is 99% pure.
One cell hires a chemist, spent 15 years in federal prison in America, where he learned how to make fentanyl. He then is released from prison, deported back to Mexico. And he explains to them, you don't understand. This is the most profitable drug you have ever seen or will ever see that can be used on the street.
Luis became a narco in 2015. He was reluctant at first.
When I was 15, a cousin of mine went to the U.S. I was a cattle hand earning 1,500 pesos a week. When he came back, my cousin said to me, "Man, why are you working so hard? How much do you earn?" 1,500 pesos, I said. He burst out laughing and said, "Stop doing that crap and come with me." Those 1,500 pesos are going to turn into dollars every week. I asked, "You won't get me into trouble? I won't hurt anyone?" He said, "No, don't worry." I lay awake all night thinking and looking at the moon. Then I thought, screw it, I'll take his word for it. I was getting around on foot or by bike. He said, "I'll get you a car," because he knew that was my dream. I'd think about it at night while I worked. I want more.
Do you like your new life?
I like that nothing bad's happened.
They're getting closer.
How long? 5 minutes?
Less.
Less than 5?
Yes.
What's going on?
The military.
The military?
Soldiers nearby.
Let's go.
A very busy news and pain clinic on North Dixie Highway. And Terry, what is going on out there?
Between 2010 and 2016, investigations into the pill mills and Inys Therapeutics culminated in raids by police and federal agencies.
I think President Bush many years ago used the term shock and awe, and that's exactly what we did. 150 law enforcement officers showed up at all of their homes, all of the businesses. Well, we ended up charging 13 different doctors for their part in this criminal activity. We went to Chris George's mother's house because we heard her on the wiretap talking as well. She was an office manager. We found $4.5 million in cash with hundreds and 20s and 50s. Yeah, and she claimed she knew nothing about nothing.
I pleaded guilty to racketeering, which the crimes were like, drug trafficking, money laundering, that type of thing. I spent 11 years in jail.
Tell me, how was jail then?
At first jail is like a big shock. It sucks, you're away from everybody. Now it's hard to make money when you're in there. So.
I woke up in the morning, I came out, went downstairs, there was a cable truck outside with a bunch of guys wearing vests. They told me the cable was down and we need to speak with you in the backyard, we need to show you where we're digging. I said, I really don't care. They had a badge in my face and they came swarming in. It was a traumatic experience that I'll never forget.
Alek Berlikov was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Inys founder John Kapoor received a 5.5-year sentence, but served only 2.
I learned a tremendous amount from that. That's going to propel me forward and allow me to be the man that I want to be and do things in a way where I can make myself proud as well as my family name proud. My dad's still alive. It's his name. It's my last name. It's my job to somehow rectify the situation and get back on top.
It has become more difficult to procure opioids from physicians in the US. And yet these drugs remain readily available on the streets. They continue to claim countless lives.
We're seizing millions and millions of pills that are fentanyl, that contain deadly amounts of fentanyl. And they are all over the black market. They're sold through the internet, on social media. They're sold every which way. And I'm telling you, any pill anybody buys that is not coming from a pharmacy, I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that has got fentanyl in it.
Retrace the supply route of those pills and you'll often wind up in Mexico. Since the arrest of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and other cartel bosses, the young guns are engaged in a deadly power struggle.
Culiacán vivieron un día más de violencia. Es el 10º al hilo en las escuelas y también el hallazgo de cadáveres en la vía pública.
Dos cuerpos localizados sin vida o asesinados en lo que va de esta jornada violenta.
Don't breathe this in.
It's dangerous?
Yes, it's always dangerous. Deadly.
Have you tried the drug?
No. I wouldn't be here if I had.
Did you know that in the US, there were doctors who prescribed this product? Did you know that?
Good arithmetic.
It was legal. When that ended, they had nowhere to get it. That's where we came in. They no longer had a way to get it, so they turned to the cartels here. Because when it got out of control, everything went haywire.
They figured out that Americans love pills. We love pills. That's a lottery ticket. The supplies of fentanyl explode.
They counterfeited pills. We see them in all different types.
Cartels make them just like they do in this country with the M on it or the A215, so you can't tell a difference.
People began to figure out that on the internet you could buy a pill machine for $5,000.
They're the same ones the pharma firms use, and the tech's advancing. Now they're electric with buttons and programmable. You enter that you want a kilo of pills, and out it comes.
Many people die because of these pills.
Yes, when they're too strong, that happens. That means fewer consumers and earnings fall. So it's better not to kill them.
Meanwhile, the Sacklers, whose aggressive marketing of OxyContin triggered the opioid epidemic, reached a new settlement in June 2025. Once again, the family avoided a trial.
Now, your career on the board coincided with another person who sold as his career drugs. His name was Juan Guzman, El Chapo. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
In the newspaper, I've seen his name.
He was sentenced to life in prison, and Purdue Pharma pleaded to 3 felonies, yet no one from the Sackler family is in jail. Many of us think that's not right. The audit concluded that the profits to you and to your family members is $12 billion. Is there any reason you can give us why every single dollar should not be returned to the government for distribution to the victims?
I really don't know the answer to that either. I'm sorry.
Well, you do know the answer. It's a yes or no.
Could you repeat the question? Maybe I didn't understand it.
With this story, which is a 30-year saga, you find that both the trafficking world and the corporate are kind of incapable, yes, of limiting themselves. No amount of money is enough.
You saw movements around America to have the Sackler family name taken off of museums, taken off of our prestigious universities. And that's right.
There's only one thing left to do, and that's to do justice. Yes.
I wanted them to be criminally prosecuted, but that was a decision by the United States Department of Justice.